There are a few college football rivalries better than Florida State versus Miami. And today we're going to talk about the Noles versus the Canes in recruiting and on the gridiron.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. The Noles and the Canes are both having good recruiting classes. Going to compare some of the things there where each needs to get better. But overall, the theme here with the recruiting is the way it's going for both schools. There should be some great battles between the Florida State Seminoles and the Miami Hurricanes for years to come. It should be more balance on both sides of the ball for each team. And that's just fun for rivalry football. And we're also going to talk ACC football. Where does Florida State fit in Miami as they both try to knock off Clemson, who is the prohibitive favorite this year in the league. And to help me figure all that out, Locked On Canes host and Locked On ACC host, Alex Donno. Alex, how you doing today, my friend?
Brian, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. And we're so close now. I know Miami is expected to open up their training camp around July 28th. So I would assume it's going to be similar for Florida State and most programs out there. So we're a few weeks away from training camp. We're less than 2 months away from actual games. I just cannot wait to get this thing started again.
Yeah, it's crazy saying July. Like it used to be a hard date. It was August something. But now with the newer games or the first games being in August, it's expanded and it's probably better. So the kids get a longer period of time to rest doing practices. But brother, that's just over 2 weeks from now. It's hard to imagine, but it's really close. So you're just coming back from Italy and all that long trip, and congrats on having a pretty cool trip. How much do you think Miami needs this season to go really well? I mean, they were 10-2 last year, but they came so close to making the playoff because like every year since I've been a kid, one of them's pretty much been in the hunt for a title in some capacity at some point during a season outside of a handful of seasons. But then they both like 10 or so years ago, it fell off for both of them. And it's been wild. We need one or both in Florida too, to a certain extent, the big three in Florida to be better consistently. But like, do you think there's pressure on Cristobal and his staff? Like, okay, we didn't quite get it done last year. We went and spent, Lord only knows how much money, depending on the report you want to look at, for Carson Beck. What's the expectation, do you think, for that group?
Yeah, I'll start with the pressure. I think there's a ton of it. And I think that you create some of that pressure for yourself. Because I know that right after, last season ended, and obviously everyone knew Miami was losing Cam Ward. That was a one and done situation. People were kind of thinking like, maybe are you expected to take a little bit of a step back if you go with a younger quarterback? Let's say Emory Williams maybe would have been the quarterback Miami would have gone into this upcoming season with. But then I think when you go out and you make that statement, and it's not just the money. I mean, yeah, Miami reportedly is, paying Carson Beck 7 figures. No matter how high you want to make that number, it's in the 7-figure range somewhere. When you go out and you grab a quarterback with as much experience and starting caliber experience at one of the marquee programs in college football at Georgia, which is what Carson Beck has, then I think you create a lot of that pressure for yourself. I don't mean that as a bad thing, because it's Mario Cristobal's job to put the best possible roster on the field each and every year. But you definitely raise that expectation when you go into a season, following up what Cam Ward did last year and clearly having the ambition to create something like that again when you go out and grab a guy like Carson Beck. And as far as Mario Cristobal goes, he's headed into his 4th season. And, the trajectory so far, it's obviously gone up a little bit every year. He had a really rough, 5-7 first year at the helm at Miami. It kind of obliterated the roster and was resetting things when he first got in. It did not go well in 2022. Then you follow it up with some improvement, a 7-5 season, 7-6 with the bowl game, and then you get to double-digit wins, which is something Miami had not done since 2016, and getting that 10-win season with Cam Ward last year. So, I think the local expectation would be to try to produce something similar, if not better, right? I mean, the Hurricanes fell just short last year of an ACC championship game appearance. And had they been in that ACC title game, win or lose, there was a good chance they would have made the college football playoff either way. So you fell short of both of those goals. And just, based on the noise that Mario Cristobal has been making in recruiting for the past 3-4 years, and also the investment that Miami's administration has been making into try to actually prioritizing football in a way that they had not done under some of the previous head coaches before Cristobal got there. I look at expectations this year, Brian, and I think folks are thinking Miami should be in, let's say, the 10-win regular season range, and that anything short of an ACC championship game appearance would be a disappointment. If they were to replay the same exact year they had a year ago, which involved falling short of the ACC championship game, I think you would call that a disappointment. I think you have to get to that ACC title game this year.
I think that's pretty much spot on with what I would think with Miami's roster. It's pretty balanced, and they've got one of the better offensive coordinators, I think, in college football. Defense, I just need to see it work because I was baffled with what had happened. I know you and I have talked about that on and off air. Florida State, obviously, on my side of the ledger, you talk about blowing something up. I mean, there were grenades all over the place. That thing just 2-10, and then you go get Gus, who retires from head coaching, become the coordinator to work with the guy that he used to employ. You get a defense coordinator that was tremendous at Nebraska, but it's still a new system. You bring in Thomas Castellanos, who, depending on who you believe, quit at BCE or left or whatever during the end of the season. There's so many moving parts with Florida State. One could argue it's the hardest team in college football to predict because of the moving parts and just the volatility of all the different people mixing together. But the Miami-Florida State rivalry has been built on this kind of stuff my entire life. There's always drama off the field with one of the two. It's automatic, but the games would always be really good. I don't know why that is. It's just really, I don't care who you root for or how you look at it. And that's why I kind of wanted to get a backdrop. We'll come back to the season, some more thoughts on this in a little bit, but I wanted to get Alex's take on Miami. I know Florida State fans are kind of curious where they're at. He's curious too. He's not sold one way or the other. I talk to Alex all the time, but we both think they're going to be really good. We just need to see it, especially if Carson can be healthy. I believe in it. They got a chance to be really good. Florida State, I need to see Thomas Castellanos stay healthy for 12 games. I'll say that. Moving on to recruiting here, before we hit the break, I want to get one thing. Who is the best player, in your opinion, in Miami's 26 class, and why? I want to see if you say the same thing that I do. That's why I asked.
Well, I mean, I'm going chalk on this one, and I'm going to say Jackson Cantwell. He's not only the highest ranked recruit in Miami's class, the 5-star offensive tackle, but there's a reason why, depending on which recruiting service you look at, he's either the number one recruit in the class, period, or he's darn close to it. Depending on where you look, it seems almost impossible that he's not going to be a game changer at that position, from his behemoth size to the multi-athletic background that he has. I mean, just the fact that he's state record holders in Missouri for every sort of shot put and discus and javelin events. Like, he's such a strong thrower at track and field. His parents are both Olympians in track and field, so he's got that lineage as well. But that, so much of that strength, I think, just carries over to the football field that, I don't have to dig too deep to say I do think that Jackson Cantwell, who also happens to play a position that people have questions, obviously, about the way Miami has developed players in certain spots of the field, right? No, I'm sure the Locked On Seminoles everydayers are going to be saying that in the comments. Miami doesn't develop this or that, but they do develop offensive linemen. That's something Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal have a strong track record over. So I would think Jackson Cantwell, he is the absolute cannot miss guy in this recruiting class.
Yeah, I think he's the best player in the country, too. The only reason I asked you that is Darion Coleman's really good. I just had Jaden O'Neal on last night on Locked On Seminoles. He's a great kid. He's a very good prospect. Florida State's finally recruiting O-line at a higher level. And I even put, for those of you watching on YouTube on the side, like trench wars, because Florida State and Miami have put so many guys in the NFL, like Walter Jones and Florida State, all these different guys. It's been incredible. And I think for the rivalry to get back to that, guys like Cantwell have to be there. Ernest Rankins is a kid, Florida State just got a D tackle. It's an elite recruit. That makes the rivalry fun. I want to see Cantwell go against Rankins. That's why I've always watched. It's great. So, yeah. When we come back with Alex Donno, we're going to talk more about the recruiting classes. Then we'll get back into the class or the 2025 season. That's next here on Locked On Seminoles. Ever wish managing your money was a little bit easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. The biggest thing is convenience, which helps you save time and eventually save you money. There are always different ways that we spend a little more than we should, myself included. And that includes going out to eat too much. That's always been a problem of mine, or just spending too much when I'm out with friends. With Monarch Money, you can track everything under one app. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen. And if you're interested in Miami, Alex Donno, Locked On Canes, does a great job, and he's also the host of Locked On ACC. Make sure you check that out. There's a lot to talk about on that show coming up. We'll dive into that here in a little bit. But Alex, with the recruiting class this year, Miami, correct me if I'm wrong, Derrick Cooper is the 20th now? I saw he's got a date again. I think it's the 20th. But
July 20th.
Yeah, hopefully we get some kind of validity here, that it's just Derrick's a great guy. I like Derrick. Just please make a decision so I don't have to try to track him anymore. That's what I want. I'm being greedy, but that is a 5-star guy. Florida State had him on campus for an OB. I don't think they're a serious contender. I think Georgia, Miami, and Texas are the three. I know Texas has made a run on him. Have you heard anything? What's the latest that you've heard? I heard Texas has made a run, but that I got no further than that. Anything you want on your end?
Yeah, so I'm still hearing, I guess, more positive than not on Miami's chances. I know that there's a lot of things that work in Miami's favor with Derrick Cooper. He's one of those players, and this doesn't always go Miami's way, because everyone, of course, will rightfully so bring up Jeremiah Smith a couple of cycles ago. That was like the must-get South Florida kid, have to keep him home. Miami failed to keep him home. So it happens from time to time, but I feel some similarities in Derrick Cooper's recruitment to that of like Ruben Bain a few years ago and Malachi Toney a couple of cycles ago, where it's like there's certain local players where you just have to pull out all the stops to make sure that they understand like South Florida should be their home for an additional 3 or 4 years after already having lived in the area. And I know that Derrick Cooper's mom is really high on Miami. She would like her son to stay close to home. So there are certainly things that work in Miami's favor. I wouldn't say it's a slam dunk, though. Like, I'm not coming on here and saying, 8 out of 10 certainty prediction Derrick Cooper's coming to Miami, because there are, and I think you were spot on with the legitimate threats out there. I mean, obviously Georgia is a legitimate threat. At one time, Georgia had briefly Derrick Cooper's verbal commitment, several months ago. He backed off of that pretty quick, but UGA has stayed very prevalent for Cooper. And then I guess the one that gives me a little concern, that muddies the waters a little bit, is Texas. I don't know how, if Texas recently just started to prioritize Coop more, or if for whatever reason they started to surge more with Cooper recently, because when he initially postponed his decision, like you mentioned, the new date is July 20th. His initial date was July 12th, which doesn't make a huge difference. But I I'd heard some buzz that maybe with him initially postponing the date, it might have had something to do with Texas's push to kind of allow him to do more due diligence on Texas. So since the date was moved back for Derrick Cooper, I have a little less certainty than I did, let's say, a few weeks ago before he postponed that, where I felt, extremely good about Miami's chances. I would say I feel pretty good about Miami's chances, which is a slight downgrade as to where I am right now. And it's important, Brian. I mean, listen, Miami, obviously, they've done extremely well in recruiting during the Mario Cristobal era. They've not batted 1,000. They've had some misses over the last few weeks at various positions, but Cooper is one that would really hurt. Like, if Miami cannot close 5-star running back Derrick Cooper, then there's going to be some tough conversations that I'm going to have with my audience about that.
Yeah, he's a great kid too. He works hard. All the camps and stuff we've ever been to, front of the line, everybody loves him. So, yeah, I know Florida State really went after him. I just don't think they're a major player. They had him on campus multiple times, but I think it'll be one of those three: Texas, Georgia, or Miami. As far as the class goes, Darion Coleman, Jaden O'Neal, we need to talk about them. They both get quarterbacks. This is the other thing. When I was growing up, they always had, and it's a different era too, but quarterbacks would stick around those programs longer. Kind of like Emory. Like, a lot of kids would have said, goodbye Miami if they'd have taken a quarterback at the portal, and they did, and he stuck around. That's the difference in today's world. That doesn't happen all. So Miami's lucky to have that. Florida State was lucky too. They bring in a transfer. Their quarterback's not so they're both building quarterback depth. Besides Emory, though, tell me what you know about Florida State's quarterback. Where do things stand? Who's number 3? Like, if Emory wasn't healthy and they needed to go, who would that guy be?
Yeah, so I mean, the depth hasn't looked to this point all that great, which is why Miami really needed to go out and get Carson Beck. I think the expectations would be much lower had they not done that. And so just based on watching every spring football practice that was open to the media to watch and watching the spring game, I think Emory Williams is still the number 2, but I think he's got a challenge on his hands from Luke Nickel, who's heading into his true freshman season, a guy I know you covered extensively when he was in high school at Milton, Georgia, and was a guy who rose through the rankings. But he's a true freshman. So I think the big reason why I would say Emory Williams is still Miami's number 2 quarterback is he's got so much more experience than Nickel. But there were times, Brian, I mean, in the 5 weeks of spring football at Miami, I thought Nickel really started to surge the final couple of weeks when I think he's had a better grasp of the offense. His first spring football at Miami, the game started to slow down for him a little bit. He definitely has this kind of gunslinger mentality where he's gonna make some mistakes, but also make some great throws. And so again, I think that's another reason why, as a true freshman, maybe he should be your 3rd stringer, because if you need sort of the old reliable to come in, Emory Williams. And Emory, by the way, had a really awful appearance in the bowl game, back in early January or late December. So I know that there are obviously some concerns, but I think we've seen better from Emory than what he showed on that particular day against Iowa State. So yeah, I would say Emory Williams, because of him heading into his, I guess this is his 3rd year at Miami coming up, would say he's your number 2. I'd maybe say Luke Nickel is your number 3, and Miami also has Judd Anderson, who's gigantic. He's 6'7". He's got a strong arm. I guess just hasn't shown me consistently as much as the other 2. So I guess I would pencil him into the number 4 spot if I had to guess.
Okay. The question with Florida State, I mean, Thomas runs around like crazy. I'm curious to see if he can stay healthy. That's one of the things with Gus's offense is high risk, high reward. But are we really sure that the quarterback position's a good spot if Brock Glenn is the quarterback? He's still pretty unproven. I don't know if he's a great fit for what they do. And then they got Kevin Sperry, who's a freak athlete, but he's a true freshman. So it's the same kind of boat that Miami's in. Again, they're very much similar. On recruiting front, Miami's still recruiting O-line well. Florida State's finally improving. But like, looking at the rosters, there's so many similarities in how they recruit, where they recruit. It just is natural for them to be rivals. So with that, when we come back, I want to talk about the 25 season. What we think of the ACC. Is there anybody even that close really to Clemson? What's next for the league? I want to talk a little bit about maybe not just Florida State leaving, but Miami leaving the ACC as well. That is next here on Locked On Seminoles. All right, Alex, this season, 9-3, 10-2 is kind of where you see Miami as an expectation. Making the ACC title game, you've made that clear. That's the low bar, right? Is that a fair assessment?
I think anything below that you would call a failure of a season, right? I know
Okay.
It sounds like if they were to go 9-3 but miss the ACC championship game, I think you would call that a failure.
I would tend to agree. Here's where it's interesting. Louisville is impossible to predict each year because they take 5 million transfers. I trust Braum as a coach. He's a pretty good coach. SMU lost a lot of linemen, but they got their quarterback back, and he's, ironically, former Miami coordinator, is head coach. Florida State, I have no idea. Georgia Tech's got their quarterback back. Who's the team in the league that is going to sneak up on Miami, if anybody, to make that run? Is it just SMU? Is it somebody else? Who else is going to compete with Miami to make it there? I assume we both think Clemson's going to be top of the board.
Yeah. I mean, Clemson's the safe pick for ACC champions this year. Not only a really well-coached team, as we all know, under Dabo, but they returned the highest percentage of their production in the entire country, not just in the ACC.
Do they really?
They have,
wow.
80% of last year's production is back, and that includes Cade Klubnik, who I was not very high on prior to last year, but I thought Klubnik really came into his own this past season, and you expect that trajectory to continue for him. He's got a lot of weapons to throw the football to. So for a number of reasons, Clemson are and should be favored. I do have Miami penciled in at number 2, knowing that, Miami, you talked about Florida State being hard to predict. Miami can also be hard to predict because there have been plenty of times over the years where they don't meet those expectations. They usually fall somewhere under that. But in terms of the biggest threats beyond that, I think we're in a similar spot. I think Louisville has a ton of potential. Obviously, they have, similar to some other programs these days with how quarterbacks come and go. This is going to be like their 4th straight year with a different starting quarterback. Miller Moss comes in, who I think he's got a lot of potential. The transfer from USC. They've got one of the most dynamic running games in the country with the duo that they have, starting with Isaac Brown on top. So with most of the predictions that Kenton Gibbs and I have been making on Locked On ACC, he and I have both kind of been leaning to Louisville being 3rd. We're not sleeping on SMU. You mentioned they lost some of their top production from last year, but they do have Kevin Jennings back, who's going to have his first full season at starting quarterback, and he really came into his own when he took over last year, and they've got a good roster. They also have a tougher schedule, SMU, than they did last year. Last year, they got a very favorable welcome to the ACC type of treatment. They avoided some of the tougher games. That's not so much the case for them this year, but I think just kind of based on coaching and talent-wise, you probably put SMU at 4th, but I think Georgia Tech is going to be a sleeper. And that's another one where they've had that stability now at quarterback. This will be the 3rd season with Haynes King. I was almost in disbelief that he still has another year of eligibility. It feels like it's his 6th or 7th year in college football. But Haynes King has been good the last couple of years, Brian, and he's going to have that continuity there. Losing Eric Singleton, though, at receiver is going to hurt them a little bit. That was a dynamic weapon that they had. But Georgia Tech, to me, I think it's a testament to just how good of a coach Brent Key is. They're always so prepared. They're so prepared. They're always going to lose a couple games they shouldn't lose, but then they're always going to win a couple of games that they shouldn't. So I think Georgia Tech is an absolute sleeper. And then I think after those 5, I think it's a little bit tougher to handicap. I think there's going to be a lot of teams in the ACC that are going to be sort of fighting, to compete for the conference. I think there's a lot of teams that are kind of average, have a sort of a level playing field where anything can happen.
Yeah, I think Florida State is the one that it's like Phil Steele picked FSU, I believe it was 4th to tie with Georgia Tech. And I'm like, okay. I mean, Phil obviously has every metric known to man. He's got 9 different sets of power rankings. It's incredible, right? How you come up with that stuff. But anyway, there are a lot of different things. The one team that I've never been able to figure out over the last year or so is Virginia Tech. They got the Drones kid. He's got a cannon. He's 6'5", 230. Any vibe or any thought there? You cover the ACC broader than I do. That's the one school I don't want to touch. Am I missing anything there?
No, you're not. We talk about them so much on Locked On ACC because, again, like when Kyron Drones is like at his best, you see some similarities to Cam Ward, which makes sense because the two of them are cousins. They train together with the same
are they really?
Yeah, they're cousins.
I didn't know that.
They train with the same private quarterbacks coach, the same coach, Shador Sanders. The three of them work together in the offseason. But for whatever reason, Drones has proven to have very high ceiling, but also a very low floor.
When he's bad.
Yeah. and so, heading into like last year, I was really high a year ago at this time on Virginia Tech, like not like winning the conference high, but like maybe fourth place potential high, sort of that. But they really let us down last year, the Hokies. And so outside of having Drones back, there's a lot of reasons for concern. Like that team could go anywhere from 6-6 to 8-4, or 5-7 to 8-4. Like you don't really know what to expect from them. And another team I would kind of put in that same boat is Pittsburgh. I mean, you talk about inconsistencies. How did that team go from a 7-0 start last year to a 7-6 finish? Like they literally began the season on a 7-game streak, followed by a 6-game losing streak. So I don't know what to make of the Pittsburgh Panthers either. And they lost a couple of important defensive players into the transfer portal. So you never know with them. I mean, Pitt is always a tough out. Like every time they're on Miami's schedule, and they are again this year, final game of the season on the road in Pittsburgh, I always circle that team on the schedule because I know they're going to be a tough out, especially on the road, but you don't know what you're going to get with them.
Yeah, that's a team. When they started like that, I'm like, okay, this is just one of those years. And then they just hit a brick wall. Yeah. They didn't win another game. It's unfathomable. I mean, it is what it is. But last thoughts here for me, Florida State, Miami. This year is iffy because we still need to see both teams. But I really think in a year or so, like the way they're recruiting, especially in the trenches, like, again, Ernest Rankins, the big guy, Jackson Kidd, those are the guys that made the rivalry great. In the state of Florida, everybody's got skill guys. That's not really hard to figure out. When these teams have trench players, then they're both bona fide top 10 type programs. They're both trending that way again. And I think that's good for college football in general. So, Alex, any final thoughts on Miami or the ACC or anything else?
Well, I mean, I'm looking forward to Miami against Florida State this year because they're, Thomas Castellanos seems to embody the type of quarterback that Miami historically struggles against when it comes to his speed and his mobility. So you could foresee scenarios where he really gives Miami problems. I think when it was 2 seasons ago when Miami beat Boston College, but he also has his ups and downs, Castellanos. Like he's either historically he's either on or he's off. I think he had an off day against Miami a couple of years ago, but still that's the type of player that concerns you. And then the Florida State defensive line. I know Darrell Jackson is expected to have a really good year, and it means a little extra to him because he played at Miami a couple of years ago before transferring over to Florida State. And I'm curious to see, and that's mid-October, that game. So a lot of football is going to be played, and we'll have a better idea of who these teams are. But obviously on the Miami side, is Carson Beck going to be a natural fit for this offense? I didn't get to watch him in spring because he wasn't cleared to throw at that time. So there's some uncertainties there. How much better is Florida State going to be this year in general? Because, sometimes, Brian, even when, one of these teams looks better than the other, the games still end up being really close, right? I mean, there have been obviously some blowouts. I mean, Florida State practically mercy ruled Miami a couple of years ago. The blowouts happen in this rivalry. But sometimes when you think one team has a clear edge, it doesn't play out that way on the field. So I can't wait for that game.
That's why it is a rivalry, Mr. Donno. That is why it is a rivalry. Tell everybody where they can find your work, Alex.
I appreciate you having me on, first of all. And anyone who watches Locked On ACC and Locked On Canes, Brian is a frequent guest of ours on both of those shows because he does an incredible job. So, yeah, we'll have a new episodes every day coming up of Locked On ACC as we get closer to the season. So make sure you follow me and Kenton Gibbs on there. And, for anyone interested in scouting the enemy, I host Locked On Canes every single day. A lot of recruiting talk this time of year. So check me out there, Locked On Canes and Locked On ACC.
You can find Locked On Seminoles wherever you get your podcasts, Podbean, Apple, Spotify, and of course on YouTube. We will see you again soon. Take care.